Begin the Gemara today on Daf Lamed Ches and Medalef, 5 lines down from the top of the Yamud, V'tane Ma'isila Mahacha. So we're discussing the halacha that Beis Hillel said in the Mishnah that by all karbanos, and that includes even carbon chatas, if you just spray the blood once on the Mizbeach, b'diavad, that spraying takes effect, the kapara takes effect. The other ones that come afterwards, whether by all karbanos it has to be Shtayim Shein Arba, the second one, or by the carbon chatas where there's actually another 3, that's for the mitzvah to be done completely. But the kapara is by the first hazah on the mizbeach. That's the point of Beis Hillel. Said the Gemara before brought a mocker from a pasuk for this, according to Beis Hillel. Now here the Gemara brings a braisa that brings a different source for what Beis Hillel says about this.
We're talking about the outer or the inner
outer mizbeach, only the outer mizbeach,
okay.
And we're focusing on carbon chatas. Because that's the main chiddush of Beis Hillel. The Shammai says that by a chatos, there has to be a minimum of 2 hazais for the kapara to take effect. And Beis Hillel says even by a chatos, 1 is enough. The Tana Ma'isila Mahacha. The Tana brings the source for this from the following psukim. It says, V'chiper, v'chiper, v'chiper. 3 different times regarding 3 different karbanos chatos. As Rashi brings, one is by the side of a nasi, which is a king, and then by a person that brings a carbon chatas, once a seira, once a kizba, and it's all speaking about spraying the blood on the outside mizbeach, and each time the Torah writes v'chiper. And there, these 3 expressions are going to teach us that even 1 matana b'di'eved is good enough. And the Gemara, the Braisa itself, will soon spell out how exactly we learn from these 3 expressions. But first, the Braisa explains the necessity for this drasha. The reason is because otherwise I would think that I should make a comparison to say that 1 hazah, 1 spraying is not good enough. Why would I think so? So the Braisa here starts a discussion that there's 2 ways to go about it. Some take out the word sheyachil here. V'haloi dinu. I would say that let's make the following comparison. Ne'emru damim lamato. There are the bloods that are sprayed on the mizbeach on the bottom half. That's most karbanos actually. V'ne'emru dam lamayla. And then there are the bloods that are sprayed on the top half of the mizbeach. What is this? The carbon chatas. The carbon chatas is sprayed on the top half of the mizbeach. There was a chut hasikra in the middle of the mizbeach, and the bloods of the chatas is sprayed on the top half by the corners, by the kronos on the top half. So now I would maybe compare just like when it comes to blood that are sprayed on the bottom half. As we learned out already from a pasuk before, that if it's sprayed only once, kippur, that takes effect, the kapara. The Gemara before on Daf Lamed Zayin brought the source from this. It says in the pasuk, "V'dam zevachecha yishafech," and that means only once. It's poured only once. It doesn't say in the pasuk saviv. And from there we learn regarding all karbanis that once is enough. But that's a pasuk that only applies to all karbanis. You can't use the pasuk yishafech regarding carbon chatas. How's carbon chatas sprayed in the mizbeach? It's not even really sprayed. It's with the finger. You dip the finger into the vessel of the blood and you place it on the mizbeach. So you can't use the term yishafech to apply for carbon chatas. Regarding all karbanis, which is sprayed on the mizbeach, so spraying and pouring has some kind of similarity, that it's coming out of the vessel without your finger. So that's a pasuk that's only for all other karbanis. But now maybe I would say that just like I find for the bloods that are sprayed on the bottom half of the mizbeach, that 1 is enough. So so too regarding the bloods that are placed on the top half of the mizbeach by the carbon chatos, if they only once kippur, that it should also be mechaper. That's one way to compare. Or the Braisa says, and have an option to compare the carbon chatos, that is the bloods that are placed on the outside mizbeach, compare it in a different direction, going this way. There are the bloods that it speaks about from the carbon chatos that you put on the inside mizbeach. Then there's the carbon chatos where the blood is put on the outside mizbeach. So maybe I should compare these. Just like when it comes to the blood that is placed on the inside mizbeach, there the halacha is, as the Mishnah said in the beginning of the Perek, if you are missing even just one of the corners that you have to place the blood on, then it does not take effect at all. The kapara requires all 4. So I should compare and say that the bloods that are placed on the outside mizbech should be the same thing. If you're missing one, then what you accomplished is it's nothing. So we have these 2 options. So now the question is, what should I compare the Karban Chatas on the outside Mizbeach that's sprayed on the top half of the Mizbeach by the corners on top? Which should I compare it to? Says the Braisa Nidal Midayim. Let's see to whom it's more compared to. Who's it most similar to? So here as well, the Braisa will show that there's a similarity to this way and there's a similarity the other way. Don and Chutz Michotz, on one hand, there's a svara to say that we should compare the question regarding the Karban Chatas on the outside Mizbeach, on the top half, to the bloods that are sprayed on the outside Mizbeach, on the bottom half. Why should we compare the halacha that we're discussing in the outside Mizbeach to the bloods that are the inside Mizbeach? It's a whole different Mizbeach inside the Beis HaMikdash, so it's not comparable. Or there's actually a svara in the opposite, that that I should compare what we're discussing, which is the Karban Chatas that has to be sprayed on the top part of the Mizbeach, on the four corners, mechatas v'arba kronos, to the Karban Chatas that's on the inside Mizbeach, because there it's also a Chatas, and it's also sprayed on the top four corners of the inside Mizbeach. So that's more of a similarity. Now we're not going to bring any proof, we're not going to compare to the bloods that are sprayed on the outside Mizbeach on the bottom, she'ein Chatas, that's not a Chatas, and v'arba kronos, they're not on the top, they're not on the corners of the Mizbeach. So therefore we're stuck. In Svara, you can compare this way or you can compare that way. And therefore, Talmud Loimas, we have the pasuk that says, V'chiper, V'chiper, V'chiper. 3 extra times where the Torah writes the word V'chiper to teach that only one matana by the Chatas is good enough for the kapara itself. Now, how do you learn it out from these 3 terminologies that the Torah writes 3 times, V'chiper, V'chiper, V'chiper? So the Braisa explains, V'chiper is extra, right? So what is it coming to say? V'chiper, that it's enough for a kapara. That extra word, v'chiper, is telling you that you read the pasuk and it says that you have to put the matana 4 times. That's what it says clearly in the pasuk. And then it goes on to say again, v'chiper, implying that no, it's actually enough. You have the kapara, even if you didn't do it all yet. So therefore, v'chiper, the first time when it says it, it's telling you, afal pishalei nasan el shalish. That minimizes 1. It says it's going to be good enough for a kapara, even if it's only 3. And when it says it again, v'chiper, so it's coming to say yet again this point, that it's a good enough of a kapara even with only 2. Even with only 2 times spraying on the Mizbeach, or placing on the Mizbeach. And v'chiper, achas. And then the 3rd time is coming to minimize yet again, that even if with only 1 matana on the Mizbeach by the Karban Chatas, it'll be good enough. This is the source for Beis Hillel, that even by a Chatas, just with 1 matana, it'll be mechaper. Till here's the Braisa. Okay, so now the Gemara discusses this limud. So the Gemara asks, how are we b'chlal learning from these 3 expressions that it says, v'chiper, v'chiper, v'chiper? Do I not need these words for the very din itself, to say that you have to place the blood on the Mizbeach for the kapara? It's not extra. Seems like it's not extra. So how are we saying, this is an extra pasuk to say that the atonement happens even before, that it's enough with 2 or enough with 1? Amarava that is, Barad Mari Asbirali, Barad Mari explained this to me, that actually the words v'chiper are extra psukim, because Amakra, the pasuk says v'chiper v'nislach. So the Gemara brings an example of one of these places where it says v'chiper olav hakayim v'chatasai v'nislach loy. So it uses 2 expressions, the kapara and the slicha. Zui kapara, zui slicha. They both mean atonement, forgiving. It's the same thing. Why does the Torah use 2 expressions for this, that when you place the blood on the Mizbeach, it'll be an atonement? So the v'chiper is an extra term to say, to be makdim, that the kapara happens even if you don't do it all. And just like it is in this pasuk that the Gemara quotes, it's the same in the other 2 places where it says v'chiper, it says both expressions, kapara and slicha. So therefore these are 3 terms of kapara that are extra to say that it's even with 1 matana it's good enough. Frag the Gemara, but maybe I should darshan this pasuk differently. Amen. Maybe I should say v'chiper, when the Torah writes this extra v'chiper, what is it coming to say? That if you place the blood 3 times in its proper place on the top half of the Mizbeach by the corner, and va'achas lamata, and one of them you place on the bottom, maybe that's what it's coming to say. Not that if you did not do the 4th one at all, only if you did the 4th one, but you did it on the bottom. That's what that v'chiper is coming to say, that it would qualify. And then when it says he had a second time v'chiper, it comes to say v'chiper afal pishul inosan el shtayim lamata ushtayim lamayla. Maybe this is coming to add that if you did 2 on the top and now 2 of them you did on the bottom, that it would qualify. And then when it says the third time, so here the Gemara says a chiddush. V'chiper, when it says the third time v'chiper, I should say it means afal pishul inosan lamayla elo lamata. Even if he didn't spray above at all, he sprayed it only below, then it should still be mechaper. So as you see here in the Lashon of the Gemara, it sort of skips a step. The Gemara does not say that when it says the third time v'chiper, that if you did 3 above and 1 below, that it should be good. Or again, the other way around, 1 above and 3 below, that it should be good. Rather, the Gemara skips and says that the third time v'chiper, maybe is coming to say that if you do it all lamata, below the chota sikra, that it should be good. Why does the Gemara skip a step? So in Rashi, it doesn't, no clear explanation. Taisus asks this question. Taisus has like answer pshat here in the Gemara, but according to what Rashi says, there's a Hagah in Taisus that says that at this point the Gemara is thinking misvare, that once I see that the pasuk is saying that 3 of the 4 hazahs could be below, so that shows that the majority could be below. So if roiv could be below, that means that the pasuk is saying that all of it could be below, and therefore the Gemara is asking in this way, that the third v'chiper should come and say, not that you don't have to do the hazahs at all, but that the hazah, if it's done in the wrong location, not above by the corners, but on the bottom half of the mizbeach, that it should take effect, and then that would mean that even if you do all of it lamata, it should take effect. But there's no source to what Beis Hillel says that if you skipped any of the hazahs, you didn't do 3 of them, and you did only 1 of them, that should be good enough. How do we know that? So Omer Ravada Bar Yitzchak says on the way this question was asked with this svara that I just mentioned before, if that's the svara here, that now that the Torah writes 3 times of chipper, and I see that the majority can be done below, and therefore I say that it could all be done below and it'll be mechaper, so it can be told to Torah's arba kronis. So you mevatel the whole chiddush that the Torah writes regarding the chatos, that has to be 4, and where 4 by the corners, which is on the top by the corners of the mizbeach. You could do, if you do it on the bottom, it's mechaper. So the Gemara says, what's the problem with that? If I have an extra pasuk which indicates this idea that b'diavad, if you spread it on the bottom, it'll be mechaper. So yeah, we're mevatel this din. The mitzvah is takeh that it should be done in its right place lamaila. But even if it wasn't, even if it was done lamata, it's mechaper. What's the problem with this? We could say that it's lechatchila, it's supposed to be done lamaila, and b'diavad, if it's done lamata, none of the hazos were done lamaila, it'll still be mechaper. Maybe that's the pshat in the pasuk. But again, the point of the Gemara's question is, maybe I should still say that the hazos must be done on the mizbech, at least somewhere in the mizbech, lamata. So Rave argues with this whole entire svara. What's the svara that you're saying? That once you see that 3 could be done lamata, so then that would tell you that all 4 could be done lamata. As we'll see from the Hemshech of the Gemara, the reason why when the Gemara asks this question, the Gemara is only asking the question in this eifin, that all 4 should be done lamata, because in the continuation of the Gemara, there's going to be a whole discussion here. Is there such a thing by spraying blood in the mizbeach that some of the blood is on the top half and some of the blood is on the bottom half? Is there such a kind of a svara? We never find by any carbon such a kind of thing. That's what the Gemara will soon prove. And therefore, when the Gemara al-Chatchila asks the question to say that maybe the pasuk is not coming to say the point that Beis Hillel says, that you could skip some of the hazas of the blood. Rather, it's coming to say, with the extra v'chipper saying that it could be done lamata, that b'diavad lamata, it's okay. The Gemara is asking the question in such a eifin that if all of the azas are done lamata, then it should qualify. But not if some lamaila and some lamata, because that's a strange thing. The Gemara will soon say that we really don't find. So the Gemara over here now, though, answers, Rava comes and says that this whole svara that you're saying, that once the Torah writes 3 times, that shows me that the majority could be done lamata, and therefore I would learn out from that all of the bloods should be sprayed lamata. That's not a svara. So Rava says, what is something that needs 3 corners? Have a lekronis. So that's the words that the Torah writes that you have to have the 4 kronis. So if you want to be mitzi from 3, if you want to be mitzi and say that it could be done lamata, you're going to need for 3, so if you have 3 psukim v'chipper, that means that only 3 can be done lamata, and 1 still has to be done lamaila. if you want to have a raya that all four can be done lamata, so then you have to have a fourth pasuk, a fourth v'chipper. You do not have a fourth v'chipper. That's what the Rav is saying here. The lashon that the Rav says is zeu davar shetzarich shalish is a little bit of a hard lashon to understand, according to this pshat that Rashi says. Taisus asks on this, but this is the point that according to Rashi of what the Rav is saying here, that if you're only learning out from 3 words v'chipper, so that means that it's only for 3 of the hazahs that can be done lamata, not for the 4th. So in other words, Rav is rejecting this whole entire concept that once I see that raiv of the bloods could be sprayed lamata b'diyeved, so that means that the 4th one also. So Rav says no, you need 3 for 3, and then for the 4th one that it can be done lamata, you would need a 4th pasuk. So therefore, you can't ask this question that you should learn from here that all 4 should be done lamata. So therefore, the Gemara says differently. So what is our question? That l'chayre, this brayse that brings the source from v'chipper, it's not necessarily a proof to what Beis Hillel said, that you could skip one of the hazahs, or 2 or 3, and even with only 1 is good enough. Maybe we should dash in this pasuk like this. V'chipper afal pishol inosan ela achas l'mayla v'shalish l'mata. If the Torah adds that 1 extra v'chipper, I would say that if you sprayed once above and 3 times below, if the Torah writes, if the Torah would write only once, then I would say that even 1 could be done lamata. Then the Torah writes a 2nd time and a 3rd time. What does 3 times tell you? 3 times tell you that the bloods could be sprayed b'di'evet 3 times below, as long as 1 is above. Maybe that's what the pasuk is coming to say. So again, the point of the Gemara's question is, Beis Hillel is saying that you learn from the 3 extra v'chippers to say that even if you skip 3 of the hazahs altogether and you just sprayed once, that b'di'evet it's good. So the Gemara is asking, how do you know? Maybe it's not to skip the other 3 altogether. Maybe it's just coming to say that the other 3 were done in the wrong place. It was done below instead of being done above. Maybe that's what we're darshaning. So now the Gemara is asking that maybe you should say that when you spray the blood of the karban chatos, even if they were done in different parts of the mizbeach, 1 above and 3 below, maybe that should qualify. Maybe that's what the pasuk is coming to say.
But the din is that it should be all 4 of them.
The mitzvah, l'chatchila, right? The mitzvah. The mitzvah l'chatchila is all 4 on the 4 corners above. But then we have the extra 3 psukim of a chipper. Maybe that's coming to say that b'diyeved, if 1 is above and 3 are below, then it should be mechaper. Okay, so now this the Gemara says no, that can't be, because loy matzinu dam, we never find damim, that is, we never find regarding blood shechetzi lamayla v'chetzi lamata, that part of it is sprayed above and part of it is sprayed below, and it's mechaper. There's no such a thing. Okay. Right? So therefore, that cannot be how you dash in the pasuk. So when it says here the extra v'chippers, it's not coming to say that we're going to deduct 1 and say if you do 1 below, if you do 2 below, if you do 3 below. No, it means 1 was above and the other ones were skipped, were not done at all. Because to say that above and below, that we never find. Okay, so now the Gemara discusses this point. Is that true? Veloy, do we not find such a thing that bloods are sprayed above and below? But Vatanan, we learned in the Mishnah in Yuma regarding the Aveda of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the Kohen Gadol comes in with the blood, and it says, Hiza mimeno achas lamayla v'sheva lamata, as we say in Yom Kippur in the Nusach of the Aveda a few times. He sprays once above and 7 times below. So you see that he's spraying above and below. Now, the way the Gemara understands this in the question here, when it's asking this, is that the Kohen is standing in front of the Oren, and there's the Kapaitis, and the Kapaitis is a thick, a tefach, and he's standing in front of the Kapaitis, and he has to direct the blood. It goes in the ear on the Achas Lamaila. One time when he sprays the blood, it has to be right across of the top part of the Kapaitis. And then the other 7, he has to direct in the ear against the lower half of the kapaitis. That's how the Gemara is understanding. What else defines the lamayla and lamata? It's in the ear, across the kapaitis. The blood does not go on the kapaitis itself. It goes on the floor. But it's in the ear, across to the kapaitis, against the top half of the kapaitis or the bottom half of the kapaitis. So we see that there's this concept regarding blood, that part of it goes above and part of it goes below in relation to one keli, or one entity of this kapaitis. The Gemara answers, no, that's not what achas lamayla v'sheva lamata means. In the Bach adds hahu, over there it's kematzlev. It says there in the Mishnah that you don't have to be mechavan loy lamayla v'loy lamata, elo kematzlev. What is kematzlev? So the Gemara explains, my kematzlev, what does the word kematzlev mean? Machvir Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda showed kim begandra. or kemangedna, which is like when you give malchus for a person, lashes. So the lashes on the back of the person, the lashes are not all in the same spot in the person's back. The one that gives the lashes directs his hand in such a way that the lashes goes one and then a little below it, a little below it, a little below it. That's the lashes. So what the Gemara is saying over here regarding this halacha of the blood, that the point is not that you have to make sure that the blood goes in the ear space, keneged, the top half of the kapaitis, keneged, the bottom half of the kapaitis. That's not what it is. It's the way you're directing your hand. The way you're directing your hand, it comes out that the blood lands, the first blood lands closer, and then the other bloods land further away. But it's more, and the point is in the direction of the hand and how the blood is going to land on the floor. But it doesn't have to be in the ear space, keneged the top half of the kapaitis, or keneged the bottom half of the kapaitis. So therefore that's not a source for this concept that there's bloods that's lamaila and lamata. But the Gemara asks also from the Avodah in Yom Kippur, it says, another Avodah that's done on Yom Kippur, it says there in that Mishnah, Hiza al Torah shel Mizbeach, that the Kohen has to also spray, and in the inside Mizbeach, and it says the term Torah of the Mizbeach, Sheva Pamim, 7 times. Now what does Torah, this term Torah mean? So the Gemara says, my lab, don't you think the word Torah means al palgei the Mizbeach, that you're aiming to spray the blood on the wall of the inner Mizbeach, where? Right at the center of it. Why would I say the word Torah means at the center of the Mizbeach? Kedamri inshit. It's the expression that people say, Tor Tiara de Yoma, regarding the middle of the day, right by noon time. That's called Torah when the sun is the strongest and it's the clearest time of the day. That's called Torah de Yoma. So over here as well, the term of Torah shel Mizbeach refers to the center of the wall of the Mizbeach. So what's the Gemara's question? If the mitzvah is to spray it right at the center of the Mizbeach, what ends up happening? You can't be mitzamtzim to spray exactly at the center. Some is going to go above, some is going to go a little bit below. And that's how the mitzvah of the dam is going to be. So you see that on this mizbeach, some are above and some are below. So we have a source for this concept, that the kapara is done in this eifin. So why are we saying that we don't find such a thing that by blood, some go above and some go below? And it says the Gemara, that's not the title of the word Torah shel mizbeach. Amarava bashile loy. It's not on the middle of the wall of the mizbeach, rather agiluya, on the exposed, an open part on the top of the mizbeach. Just like it says in the pasuk, ke'etzem hashamayim lotoyar, that like the essence of the heavens, which is clear, which means revealed and clear. So over here as well, what does it mean? On the top of the mizbeach, when it came to doing the spraying of the blood on the top of the mizbeach hapanimi, what was the inside mizbeach used for? Ketaitis. And they had to move away the ashes to expose the roof of the Mizbeach. And then on the roof of the Mizbeach is where they sprayed the blood. So the fact that they had to expose the roof of the Mizbeach, that's gilui, to expose it, that's what the word Torah shel Mizbeach means. Now the Gemara asks from another case, what we see regarding the leftovers of blood. What happens with bloods that are sprayed on the top half of the Mizbeach by the Karban Chatas? What do you do with the leftovers of that blood? You pour it on the foundation, on the bottom of the Mizbeach. So I see the same blood, some of it is sprayed on the top, and then the leftovers is then poured on the bottom half of the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, Shirayim loy ma'akvi. These Shirayim, these leftovers, they do not hold up the kapara. And we're talking over here about bloods which are for the kapara. We don't find regarding bloods that cause the actual kapara to be half above and half below. But there are the leftover bloods from a karban chatas that was sprayed on the inside mizbeach. The man da'amar or ikke man da'amar, there is an opinion later in the Masechta, that says ma'akvi, that over here by this carbon, pouring the blood on the side of the mizbeach after you're done with the zrika on the inside mizbeach, it does hold up the kapara. So you see over here that there's the bloods that are sprayed on the inside mizbeach on the top. And then there's the blood that's poured on the foundation on the bottom, on the outside mizbeach. So you see that there's a maila and lamata for the same kapara. And says the Gemara, that's not a source for the point we're looking for. B'chad makim kamrina. What I'm saying is that regarding the same mizbeach, we don't find that half is above and half is below. And therefore, we have the drasha b'Hillel. When it says in the pasuk v'chiper, to minimize the amount of the placing of the blood of the mizbeach that's necessary, you can't say that it means that it doesn't have to be above, that part of it could be below. There's no such thing. Each time it says v'chiper, it's coming to say that it's enough for the kapara, even if you missed or completely skip one of the hazahs, and it says 3 times, that means even if you skip 3, and therefore even 1 hazah is good enough. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he said, he brought this machlokes of Beishamai and Basila in the following way. Beishamai says, Shtei matonish bechatos. Regarding carbon chatos, you need a minimum of 2 times placing the blood on the mizbeach. And the Gemara before Daf Lamed Zayin brought the source for this. Why Beishamai says a minimum of 2. And va'achas shebachol Zevochim, and by all other karbonis, even just 1 is the kapara. Matirais, it's going to be matter then to go ahead and do the next stages of the carbon, which is to be makter the other parts of the mizbeach, and then to eat from the meat from it. Umefalgais, or umefaglis, that is. And then the halacha of pigul by all other karbonis will apply even just by 1 azah. If the kohen had that machshava of pigul just by 1, it'll be pigul. By the karban chatos, it will not be pigul unless he has that machshava of pigul by 2. By 2 of the azah, because you have the minimum has to be 2. However, Bisilu says achas shebechatos and v'achas shebechol Zevochim. By chatos and by all karbonis, it's the same. That it's only 1 time of spraying or placing the blood on the mizbeach that will be enough for the kapara, and that's materes. That will be matter then to go ahead with the next parts of the carbon, and also umefageles. The din of pigul applies, and it'll passel the carbon even if you had the machshav of pigul just by 1 of the times that you place the blood on the mizbeach. Maskefla Rav Aishia, so now Rav Aishia asks him, Cain, if this is the way Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is teaching this halacha, so the listnei gabi kule Beishamai v'chumre Beisilol. So why wouldn't this machlokes of Beishamai and Beisilol be quoted in Masechta Idias, where there the Mishnah lists all the cases where it's an exception? Usually Beishamai is the one that's machmer and Beisilol is the one that's mekel. But here it comes out that this is an exception, and Beishamai is the one that's mekel, and Beisilol is the one that's machmer. Why is that? Because regarding the halacha of pigul, if by a chatos the kohen had a machshava of pigul regarding 1 time placing the blood, will it be pigul or not? According to Beishamai, it won't be pigul. You have to have the machshava of pigul for 2 times that you place the blood on the mizbeach. But according to Beis Hillel, he's machmer. Even just the machshava of pigul with 1 matan on the mizbeach, it will be pigul. So it comes out that Beis Hillel is the one that's being stringent about this, and Beis Shammai is being lenient about this. So why isn't this included in that list? Now this question is based on the point that we saw before already, that there's a concept called that by pigul, the machshav of pigul does not take effect b'chatzi mater. The pigul has to be by the full kapara that's done, by the full avodah. So according to Beishamai, that requires by the chatos at least 2, so then the machshav of pigul has to be by 2, and 1 would not passel the carbon. So the Gemara answers, Amalei Rove ki itchel lehateira itchel. When the question was discussed in the Beis Medrash, originally it was brought up regarding the heter, meaning it was brought up regarding the question of how much is the minimum of the hazah of the dam that's required. So the Havila Beishamai l'chumra. For that, Beishamai is actually being stringent. Beishamai, when the question was asked in the Beis Medrash, was, what's the minimum amount of blood that has to be sprayed for the chatas to take effect? And Beishamai said 2. So Beishamai is requiring more. That's a chumra. And Beis Hillel said only 1. That's a kula. And then from that, it also comes out the opposite regarding pigul, that Beishamai will be lenient. But that wasn't the main question, the way it was asked in the Beis Medrash. Therefore, it's not quoted in the Mishnah of Idias that lists those cases of the leniencies of Beishamai. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to this halacha itself, according to Beis Hillel, regarding the chatos. That b'diavad, so you have the first hazah, the first time you place the blood on the mizbeach, that creates the kapara. The other ones afterwards are for a mitzvah, but they're not the kapara itself. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Shalosh matanesh b'chatois. Now, so the additional 3 that you place the blood on the mizbeach by the chatos, that are not needed for the kapara itself, einan baz balayla. But nevertheless, you cannot put that on the mizbeach at nighttime, even though l'chayr it's not part of the kapara anymore. It's a mitzvah to do it, but it's not part of the kapara. So you would think that maybe it could be done at night. The avodas in the Beis Hamikdash that are needed for the kapara cannot be done at night, but this is not needed for the kapara, so it should be good at night. But no, Rabbi Yochanan says it cannot be done at night, and Rashi explains the reason is because the blood becomes puzzle by shkia sachama. As soon as the day is over, the blood itself becomes puzzle. as the Gemara learns this out later. And therefore, it can't be brought anymore at night, the other 3 times of placing it on the Mizbeach. If the owner of this Karban Chatos dies in between, you put it one matan on the Mizbeach and the other 3 were not done yet and the owner dies. So B'chlal, the halacha about Karban Chatos is, if the owner dies, you can't shech the Karban on his behalf. Then it's a Chatos that's left to die. Chatas Shamesa Balel. So the Karban Chatas has to be left to die. And also the halacha is, even if the owner was alive by the Shechita, but by any of the next stages of the Aveda, the owner dies, so then you stop. You can't continue doing anything. So over here, if the owner dies after the first time, and now you have the other 3, you could spray the other 3 on the Mizbeach, or place the other 3 on the Mizbeach. Why? Because they're not part of the kapara anymore. The kapara you can't do if the owner is not alive. But the other 3 is for a mitzvah to complete, to place on the Mizbeach. But if it's not a kapara, it can be done after he dies. A third halacha, he said that if one does these 3 placing on the Mizbeach outside of the Beis HaMikdash, which is the Isser of doing an Aveda outside, then what Aveda, if you do outside, the Yechayev Kares for? Only a kind of Aveda that's done inside the Beis HaMikdash. And then if you do that outside, Yechayev Kares. So over here, regarding these 3, even though it's not necessary for Kapara, but it is part of the Aveda, it is part of the mitzvah to complete. So therefore, Chayev, if that's done outside the Beis HaMikdash, you would be Chayev for that. Rav Papa says, regarding the same point that Rabbi Yochanan brings up, regarding these 3, after the first is done, and according to Basil, the first already did the kapara. And here Rav Papa says what Rabbi Yochanan said, but he includes more details. Yashman kitchilasai. Regarding certain halachas, we say that these 3 are just like the first. They're going to have the same halacha like the first time that it was placed on the Mizbeach. The Yashman Kisaifai. But then there are regarding other halachas that I say that these 3 times placing on the Mizbeach is already after the kapara, and therefore they have a halacha similar to Saifai. What Saifai? Like the leftovers of the blood. Like the leftovers of the blood that's poured on the Mizbeach at the end. So what is the list here? So he says, Chutz, regarding the halacha of not being allowed to bring it outside the Beis HaMikdash to be Chayev Kares. Laila, regarding the fact that you can't bring it at night, you can't put it on the Mizbeach at night. Zarus, regarding the fact that someone that's not a Kohen cannot do this. Uklisharis, that you need to have a proper klisharis, that the blood is being placed onto the Mizbeach from it. Keren, that it has to be on the proper corner, at the top of the Mizbeach. And the etzba, it should be done with the finger. Regarding all of these halachas, I say that these additional 3 times that you're placing it on the Mizbeach, it has to be done properly. Which means even though it's not mamish the kapara was done with the first 3, but it's still considered to be an aveda that is being done with the blood, and therefore it has to qualify with all these details. Another thing he says, kibus, regarding a Karban Chatos, the halacha is, if blood of the Karban Chatos went onto a garment of the Kohen, that has to be washed off properly. So this halacha of kibbutz, now when does this halacha of kibbutz apply? Only regarding the bloods that has to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, or has to be placed on the Mizbeach. If it's bloods that from the Karban Chatas that was already done, the kapara was already all placed on the Mizbeach. So then it's not, if that blood gets onto the garment of the Kohen, it does not have to be washed off. The Gemara is soon going to bring a pasuk. It says, Asher Yazeh, the blood that is there to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, to be placed on the Mizbeach. And it wasn't yet done. Okay, it wasn't yet done. Then from there, it's sprayed out of the vessel onto the garment of the Kohen. That has to be washed off. So what's the point that Rav Papa is saying here? That regarding the blood that was already placed once on the Mizbeach, and so seemingly the kapara is done already. So you may think that whatever else is left over in the vessel, if it gets onto the garment, you don't have to wash that off because that's already after the first. So he's saying no. Because you still have the mitzvah to continue doing the other 3, that blood that gets onto a garment also has to be washed off, like before the first time you place it on the Mizbeach.
Washed off during the avodah?
No, later on they wash it off, yeah. And the final halacha that he says regarding this is Vishirayim, the halacha of Shirayim, which means that there's the halacha that the leftovers of the blood has to be poured on the foundation. The leftovers is not only regarding the first time that you place the blood on the Mizbeach, but also regarding these other 3 here. Which would mean, it's a case that you had once before in the Gemara, let's say for whatever reason you have the bloods that are on 4 different vessels. And you have the one that you placed on the Mizbeach from the first vessel, and that's done. Now the remnants that's in this vessel has to be poured on the Mizbeach. But now you have another 3 vessels, and you're taking from them also and placing on the Mizbeach. Does the leftovers of those 3 vessels also have to be poured on the foundation? You may think that from those 3, they're not anymore what's required for the kapara. So Rav Papa is saying that the leftovers of them also is kitchilasan. It has the same halacha like the first one that was sprayed on the mizbeach, that the leftovers of it has to be poured. This as well has to. So all these halachas is kitchilasan. That's the list of what's like the first. We say that the other 3 are still compared like the first, even though it's not mechaper like the first, but nevertheless it's still part of the mitzvah of the avodah, and therefore it's going to be like the first. However, regarding these halachas, misa. When the owner died, Misa is the halacha that we had before regarding the halacha that the owner died. Okay, so even after the owner died, so you could continue placing the blood on the mizbeach, and also regarding loy sharia. What's the halacha of loy sharia? That means that they do not cause a heter for the basar to eat. It's only the first time that you place the blood that is what's being matter to continue to the next stages of the Aveda. But the other 3, they're not ma'akiv. That's not causing the heter to go on to the next parts of the Aveda or to eat from the basar. And v'loy mefagla. And regarding the other 3, pigul doesn't take effect there. The machshava of pigul does not matter there. And v'loy ayla legavoy. And also the halacha of by karban chatas. If you take blood from a karban chatas that was supposed to be brought in the outside mizbeach, and you brought it inside the Beis HaMikdash, it usually passels the carbon. But that's not regarding these 3 hazois. If the first one was already done, and then you took the blood from these 3 and you brought it inside, it will not passel it. So regarding these details, kisaifan. Over here, it's compared to the shirayim. Just like regarding the shirayim of the blood that you pour in the mizbeach, what's the concept of the shirayim? They do not contribute to the kapara. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to take the blood and pour it on the mizbeach, on the side of the mizbeach. Does that make the kapara? No. So regarding these halachas, I say, regarding misal, shayil, and mefaglav, loy ayla, I say, yeah, it's part of the avodah. It's a mitzvah to do this avodah, but it's not the kapara. And for these halachas, because it's not part of the kapara, so even if the owner died, you could do it, and they are not getting the heter anymore to continue going or to be able to eat, and there's no pigul, and because over here the main point is that it's not a kapara. Since these 3 is not the kapara, so therefore it's kisaifan. It's like the shirayim, which is a mitzvah. It is an aveda, it is a mitzvah, but it's not the kapara.
Who does it in the event that the owner dies? Your Yorshim, their sons, or whatever?
The Kayanim do the aveda, but the owner does not have to be alive. Regarding the other 3, the owner does not have to be alive because it's not the kapara anymore. Rav Papa says, Minoa minula. What's my source to say this halacha? So Rav Papa here is going to actually bring a raya to the first half of what he said regarding the whole list that he said, that it's kitchilasan, that it's like that these 3 are similar to the first time that you placed it on the mizbeach, and he's going to bring a raya to the one that's the biggest chiddush, which is the halacha of kibbus, that when the blood got onto the garment, you have to wash it off. So as I mentioned before, that halacha only applies for bloods that still has to be placed on the mizbeach. And Rav Papa is saying that even these 3, even though the kapara is done, but the 3 is still part of the aveda, and therefore, if that blood gets onto the garment, you have to wash it off. So he brings the source for this. The Tanan, the Mishnah says, "Nitaz menat savar ala beged." If directly from the throat of the animal, the blood sprays onto the garment of the kohen, eneton kibbus. That does not have to be washed off, because the blood that comes straight from the throat of the animal before it was received in a vessel is not yet fit to be sprayed on the mizbeach. Has to first go into a vessel. When do you have to wash off the garment? Only if it's blood that is already in a vessel and it's fit to be placed on the mizbeach and it's waiting to be sprayed on the mizbeach, and instead it went on your garment, that's what has to be washed off. Minakeren, if it was already placed on the corner of the mizbeach, and from the corner of the mizbeach it went onto your garment, or mina yisaid, or from what was poured on the mizbeach, it went onto your garment. Also, enetan kibbus. It also does not require to be washed, because that's already after it was placed on the mizbeach. It has to be in that time where it's in the vessel, fit to be poured on the mizbeach. It was not yet poured. Then, if it gets onto your garment, you have to wash it off. So now the Gemara is medayik from that Mishnah. But from here I can learn out and say min haroi lekeren. It says if it's already on the corner of the mizbeach, That if it gets on your garment, you don't have to wash it off. Well, that it sounds like, but if it's still blood that's fit to be placed on one of the corners of the Mizbeach, Ta'an Kibbus, that has to be washed. So if that's the case, that's not only the first time you place on the Mizbeach, which is Ma'akiv, but that includes the other three as well. The other three, even though it's not Ma'akiv for the Kapara, but it is part of the mitzvah to place it on the corner of the Mizbeach. So therefore, that still is blood that if it gets onto your garment, it would require it to be washed off. So the Gemara says, but if that's how you're being medayik, the lashon of that Mishnah, l'tay mech, according to your reasoning, according to your diok, when it says mina yisoid ein eton kibos, the blood that's poured onto the foundation of the mizbeach after all the blood is done. In other words, you already put the blood on all four corners of the mizbeach. Now you have the leftovers, and that leftovers is poured onto the foundation. So what did it say in the lashon of the Mishnah? That from what was already poured on the foundation, if it gets onto your garments, that you don't have to wash off. So you should make care of similar diak. Ha min harayli. But if it's the blood that's in the vessel that is about to be poured it should be poured onto the foundation, ta'an kibbus. That should require also to be washed off. But the question is, how could that be? The pasuk says, as I mentioned before, asher yazeh, that which blood that gets onto your garment has to be washed off. Asher yazeh, the blood that's waiting to be poured on the mizbech. Yazeh, future. It's going to be poured, ksiv. That's what the pasuk says. That means prat lezeh shekvar huza. That excludes bloods that was already poured on the mizbeach. So how could you be medayik the lashon of the Mishnah this way, which would then lead you to this diuk as well, that only minay yisayit, if it's already on the foundation, then you don't have to wash it off. But if it's blood that was already placed on all four corners, and you still only have to just pour it on the yisayit, even that has to be washed off. How could that be? What's poured on the yisayit is already after the blood was yazeh. That doesn't have to be washed off. How can you make such a diuk? So the Gemara says, so the Gemara is trying to refute over here the diuk of Rav Papa. We can't make this kind of diuk. And the Gemara says, ha, mani Rav Nechemia. What we could say is, if you want to make this diuk, we could say that this Mishnah follows Rav Nechemia's opinion. What does Rav Nechemia say? The Tanah Rav Nechemia says, shiyare haydam sheikrivam b'chutz. When you have bloods that were already sprayed on everything in the mizbeach, and it's just leftovers that has to be poured on the foundation. That leftovers, if you then take this outside the Beis Hamikdash and you pour it outside, chayiv. You chayiv kares for this. What's the chiddush of Rav Nechemia? Rav Nechemia actually holds, not like the point that we're saying till now. Till now we understood that what makes the kapara, the spraying of the blood on the mizbeach. Then there's the leftovers that's poured on the yisai. That's a mitzvah, but that's not integral to the kapara at all. But Rav Nechemia disagrees to that. Rav Nechemia says that even the pouring of the leftovers on the foundation of the Mizbeach is part of the kapara. And therefore when it says in the Torah, Asher Yazeh, that this is blood that's going to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, it includes the Shirayim as well. And therefore if you do that outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you chayav kares for this. And therefore the Gemara is saying we should say the same thing according to Rav Nechemia, that if you have the blood that was already sprayed on all parts of the Mizbeach necessary, and then now you just have to pour it, that if it gets onto your garment, you'd have to wash it off. That's who this Mishnah is going according to. If you medayik the Mishnah this way. So as Rashi says, the Gemara is trying to say, Rav Papa cannot prove anything from this Mishnah because that Mishnah is going according to Rav Nechemia, which is an opinion that we don't follow. But if we don't hold like Rav Nechemia, then we could say that the 3 times after the first time, you still have to spray the 3 times. And if that gets onto your garment, maybe you don't have to wash it off because it's not part of the kapara. That's okay. We'll stop over here. The Gemara continues over here now addressing this point. This Mishnah going according to Rav Nechemia. Okay.
But